sitting.
The Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023 resolution is to be tabled and taken. The Trademarks Amendment Rules 2023 are to be taken.
And that's what's on the agenda. It should be noted that elements of the day's agenda can be changed or moved. Before we go, here are a few things you should bear in mind if you plan to attend a session at Gordon House. No visitor shall create any act of disorder within the precincts of the House. No visitor shall be admitted to the House without first obtaining an admission card. Visitors who remain within the precincts of the House during a suspension of the session are asked to keep silent. No photography, videography, or sketching of the proceedings is allowed, unless so authorized by the presiding officer. And there should be no smoking inside the parliamentary building. Here are some more interesting facts about the procedures of the Houses of Parliament. While listening to the presentations from the members, you might hear the term Contractor General. The main function of the Contractor General is to monitor and investigate on behalf of Parliament matters concerning the award of government contracts. The Contractor General also monitors the award and implementation of licenses and permits. These licenses are given to operators of gas stations or petrol stations, stone quarries, and other establishments. He is also responsible for ensuring that licenses are used in accordance with terms and conditions under which they are granted. A Contractor General can become the Attorney General. The Attorney General of Jamaica is the chief law officer in Jamaica. Section 79, subsection 1 of the Constitution of Jamaica states that there shall be an Attorney General who shall be the principal legal advisor to the government of Jamaica. And pursuant to the Crown Proceedings Act, all civil proceedings by or against the government are instituted in the name of the Attorney General. Historically, the position can be dated back to 1671 when Edmund Duke was appointed to do the job. Now over to the proceedings.
Ms. Cohen, also from Clerk's office, always here to facilitate visits. We have a library here that you can use. It's not the most extensive one, but as students, you're always welcome here. And if you want to come and tour the facility, it's always here for you. It's your parliament. You are to come and participate whenever you have occasion to do so. And if there is any aspect of you need assistance with in terms of your research and so on, access to Hansard. Everything that's said here is recorded. So the Hansard is here from, I was going to say 1492. It's more like 1962. But the Hansard is here. So if there is research to be done, you're always welcome on the premises. Is that very clear to you? Excellent, thank you. So enjoy your day with us, and once again we apologize for our late start. Now, members of the Senate, today is the funeral rites for a former member of this House, former Senator Delano Franklin, who served in this Senate from 2002 to 2007. Today, I understand his funeral rites will take place at the University of the West Indies at 2 p.m. So I know that our colleagues, many of them will be attending the funeral today. So we are anticipating that we will finish our business by that time. I'm going to invite Senator Scott Motley to read a tribute or to present a tribute for the record of this Honorable Senate in memory of the service of Senator Franklin. Senator Gale will respond on behalf of government senator. Senator Scott Motley.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, Senator Scott Motley, Senator Brown, and then Senator Gale.
As you said, Mr. President, today, former Senator and former Minister of State, Delano Franklin, will be laid to rest. Delano, in the 63 years that he lived, occupied many positions and stood on many stages. He was an attorney at law, a notary public, an author, politician, father, and husband. But I dare say one of the things that made him proudest is that he was a Fortis. And indeed, the way in which the Fortis community rallied around him during his illness, you can see that it was a mutual feeling from then. Mr. President, Delano Franklin served the People's National Party for almost all of his adult life. I do not intend to go through all the things that he did because I'm cognizant of how long that would take. I have come across several articles written about him which have taken up 2 pages in the Observer, and that was only the first part of the tribute to him. But I will say, Mr. President, that when he was Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2000 to 2007, he was given special responsibility for the Jamaican diaspora and overseas. So that the first National Diaspora Conference, which was held in 2004 and which now takes place on an annual basis, was held under the theme, The Jamaican Diaspora Unleashing the Potential. And Delano felt passionately that there had to be a stronger connection between Jamaica and the diaspora. He was the first person to moot the possibility of having a senator who would represent the diaspora. And since then, we have heard many people speak about it. And as we go forward into the whole area of constitutional reform, we might see this happen. He was chief advisor to Prime Minister Bipartisan, and he was special advisor to Portia Simpson Miller. I was most familiar with him as chairman of the Michael Manley Foundation, as I was his deputy chair. And I can tell you that whatever Delano does, he embraces with passion, and he serves diligently. When he put together the anthology of the speeches of Michael Manley and his budget presentations, he had a particular vision of what it could do. And he said it would go a far way in helping to redefine and expand the boundaries that oftentimes limit the expansion of the playing field of social, political, and economic governments. And he wanted to ensure or play his part in seeing that more states can secure equality for their people. I think this was the foundation of everything that he did. How to move the people forward, how to educate the people, how to empower them, and how to create a just society. So today, from this side, we extend our condolences to his wife, to his family, to his numerous friends. And we know that the funeral today will represent the wide cross-section of the society which he impacted. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Senator Scott Motley. Senator Brown.
Mr. President, I hope that my voice will project in this almost micless chamber.
Senator, you can come around to the front barrier, Senator Morris used to say. students from Contractor, you see the problem we are having, right? Okay.
What I'm trying to do is pass the mic. Which side again? Delano on the left hand side, like.
The Dutchie.
Yeah, but he wants the mic to be passed. Mr. President, it wasn't my intention to speak in terms of tribute. The opposition has done it by way of our deputy leader of the Senate, Senator Scott Motley. But having known Delano and worked with him from the early 70s in his student activism, it would be remiss of me not to say that we have lost a compassionate soul, one who cared for the people and who spent his entire life serving humanity. This is why, President, on behalf of former Senator Norman Grant, Novel Clark, who served with him, they have asked me to include them in tribute to Delano, Senator Franklin. Also, in the absence of Senator Floyd Morris, who served with him, to express his own sympathy and the tribute that Floyd would want to pay. Mr. President, a newly elevated King's Counsel in Grenada, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, has asked me also to add his voice in tribute. Ruggles was a long-standing friend of Delano, who served in the Caribbean student movement, and during Delano's illness and hospitalization, Ruggles had reached out to the family and has asked me to add his name to whatever tribute we pay. So, from Jamaica, far and wide, we respect and recognize Delano's service to humanity. For those of us who sang with him in the trenches, Forward March, we will miss you, Delano. For those of us who sang the International with you, we will miss you, Delano. And for those of us who will lustily sing Jamaica Rise, the song of the People's National Party, we will miss you, Delano. Gone too soon, brother. Yellow, as we call you in another place and another time, enough respect. You serve the nation with dignity, with composure. Gone too soon. Rest in peace. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Before you start, Senator Gale, it was remiss of me to indicate that I think Senator Gabriel Morris and Senator Damian Crawford have requested to join online. So can I have your agreement with respect to that?
All right.
Thank you very much. I hope that they're there, and I'm sorry that I didn't do it before. Senator Gale.
Thank you, President. You know, on behalf of the government side, we pay tribute to what I would consider to be a very distinguished gentleman with a distinguished name, Delano Roosevelt Franklin. And so when you put Roosevelt and Franklin together, that demonstrates it being distinguished. He served with distinction in the Senate. And at the time that he served, he was also the Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where he gave exemplary service in supporting that ministry. He's also the uncle of the Deputy Chairman of the Jamaica Labour Party, Andre Franklin. And sometimes I do wonder how they get along. Mr. President, and Damien and Ransford.
Yes, but those are two
But you see,
different characters.
there's a connection. There's a connection between Damien and Ransford with the Fortis. I'm still trying to find the connection between Andre and Delano. But he was also an author. And, you know, the We Want Justice, Jamaica and the Caribbean Court of Justice, the Jamaican diaspora. He also did The Right Move, Corporate Leadership and Governance in Jamaica. There are some strange names to those books, but that's Delano, someone who was always thinking out of the box. I recall, Mr. President, you know, being an attorney in his skill, criminal and civil litigation, I had the opportunity of spending 2.5 hours with him in the line in the airport in Gatwick. And it was a very engaging discussion. And that's where I found out that he also had an interest in labor law. And not many lawyers even made the attempt to represent in that field of labor law. But what I also found interesting is that he never only confined himself to that. Sports law was one of his interests.
Yes.
Entertainment law was another one of his interests, and he was a good friend of one of my cousins in Florida who is in the entertainment business. So I understand that particular connection. He was also a trained educator, a very distinguished gentleman, someone that this country owes a debt of gratitude to. Today, we pay tribute to him, and we extend condolences to the community that he serves and his family. May his soul rest in peace.
Because as is the custom, where one of our number has passed, we rise for a moment of silence. May his soul rest in peace, like perpetual shine. Madam Clerk, would you please pen the appropriate correspondence to the family of Senator Franklin, and as is our developed custom, enclose a copy of the Hansard that they may recognize that the tongue of good report has been heard in relation to their father, friend, and husband. Thank you very much. Statements by ministers. Senator Hill, I recognize you from a seat on your purposes of today's sitting. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. Jamaica 4th Supplementary Estimates for the financial year 2022-2023. Report of investigation into the allegation concerning act of improprieties and irregularities in the procurement practices at the Bethlehem Moravian College during the period 2015 to 2017. White paper number 1 of 2023 entitled National Housing Policy and Implementation Plan 2023. Green paper number 1 of 2023 entitled Watersheds Policy for Jamaica. Ministry paper number 29 of 2023 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated December 12, 2022. Ministry paper number 30 of 2023 entitled Revenue Measures for 2023-2024 financial year. Ministry paper number 31 of 2023 entitled Climate Change Policy Framework for Jamaica. Ministry paper number 32 of 2023 entitled Emissions Policy Framework for Jamaica. Ministry paper number 33 of 2023 entitled Watersheds Policy for Jamaica. Government of Jamaica Climate Change Policy Framework for Jamaica, dated March 2023. Government of Jamaica Emissions Policy Framework for Jamaica, dated March 2023. The Public Procurement Act. The Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023 and its resolution under the Public Procurement Act. Auditor General's examination of the fiscal policy paper for the financial year 2023-2024. Annual report on audited financial statement for Human Employment and Resource Training, National Service Training Agency, Trust, for the financial year 2021-2022. Annual report on audited financial statements for the Electoral Commission of Jamaica for the financial year 2021-2022. Annual report for the Bath Foundation and Hotel for the financial year 2029-2022. Annual report for the Tourism Enhancement Fund for the financial year 2021-2022. Annual report for the Devon House Development Limited for the financial year 2021-2022. Annual report for Spectrum Management Authority for the financial year 2021-2022. Annual report for Eagle Jamaica Limited for the financial year 2021-2022. And annual report on audited financial statements of Jamaica Ultimate Tire Company Limited for the financial year 2018-2019.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives. Petition, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I'll move the following motion. Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023, Public Procurement Act, Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023 Resolution. Whereas Section 4.1 of the Public Procurement Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the methods of procurement and procurement process set out in Parts 3 and 5, respectively, of the Act do not apply to any public procurement specified in the first schedule of the Act. Whereas by virtue of Section 4.2 of the Act, the Minister may, by order, subject to affirmative resolution, amend the first schedule to the Act. And whereas on the 16th day of February 2023, the Minister made the Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023, and whereas it is desirable that the Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023 be affirmed, Now therefore be resolved by the Honorable Senate as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023 Resolution, and 2. The Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023 laid on the table of the Senate on the 17th day of March 2023 is hereby affirmed. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. President, also, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move to introduce and have read a first time. 1. A bill shortly entitled the National Compliance and Regulatory Authority Act 2023, and 2. A bill shortly entitled the Copyright Amendment Act 2023.
Thank you, Minister. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of a bill shortly entitled the National Compliance and Regulatory Authority Act 2023 and the Copyright Amendment Act 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Members who have heard the question. Those in favor? Aye. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Madam Clerk?
The bill shortly entitled the National Compliance and Regulatory Authority Act 2023 and the bill shortly entitled the Copyright Amendment Act 2023 read a first time.
Minister is asking for second reading.
Indeed, Mr. President, I do beg to give notice of the second reading of the bill.
Thank you, Minister. Public business.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Members who have heard the question. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Minister?
Mr. President,
I'm sorry. Is it possible to turn this off? Is it possible to turn this off?
Okay. Mr. President, I stand here today to commence the debate of this Honorable Senate on the public procurement. Yes. Thank you very much. So I'll start.
Man, get me better on the PM.
Yeah, man, I start again.
I say, yeah, man, you better on the PM.
No, yeah, man, you're going to start again.
No one will stop this.
Mr. President, clearly he's in a good mood this morning. So I will say, Mr. President, I stand here today to commence the debate of this Honorable Senate on the Public Procurement Amendment to First Schedule Order 2023, which I will refer to, Mr. President, as simply the order. The proposed promulgation of this order, Mr. President, is meant to amend the first schedule of the Public Procurement Act, which I will refer to as the Act, provide an exemption from the methods of procurement and procurement process set out in parts 3 and 5 of the Act for consultancy agreements to be entered into between the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority and the Singapore cooperation enterprise agencies of the Government of Jamaica and the Government of the Republic of Singapore, respectively. This, Mr. President, is to enable the Jamaican Special Economic Zone Authority to receive technical assistance from the Singapore Cooperation Enterprise in relation to the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority's mandate to implement the Jamaica Logistical Hub Initiative and Master Plan. Mr. President, as the Honourable Senate would be aware, Jamaica is being strategically positioned as a globally competitive logistics hub and an efficient investment destination. We heard lots of that last night in the Prime Minister's outstanding presentation. Mr. Jamaica, Mr. President, it will grow. Don't worry. Mr. President, is ideally located at the interaction of the east-west and north-south trade routes, with Kingston Harbour being the 7th largest natural harbour in the world. As was stated by the Honourable Prime Minister in his address to the to the 8th Annual International Conference and Exhibition, ICE, on June 14, 22 at the Montego Bay Convention Center, you would probably know it better as the World Free Zone Organization Conference, at that time, which we held, proposed and supported and driven by this ministry. The goal is to leverage these natural assets and position Jamaica as the 4th global logistics hub, comparable to Singapore, Dubai, and Rotterdam. I remember very clearly, Mr. President, when I was in the Middle East and Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid began to talk about Dubai is going to be this and Dubai is going to do it, and people said they don't even have oil. Where are you going? Well, nobody said that, no. So we have that vision and we're going to execute, and this piece of legislation is part of that exercise. As the members of this Honourable Senate may be aware also, to further this objective, Jamaica is pursuing the establishment of a logistics hub. The Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority has been designated as the implementing agency for the Jamaica Logistics Hub Initiative, Market Analysis, and Master Plan. Mr. President, the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority, established by the Special Economic Zones Act, which came into operation on August 1, 2016, is charged with, among other things, regulating, supervising, developing, and promoting certain geographical areas designated as special economic zones. The Special Economic Zone Act also requires Jamaica's Special Economic Zone Authority to exercise its functions based on principles that maximize its effectiveness and efficiency, and it is desirable that its operations will enhance the Jamaican economy by increasing levels of investment and creating job opportunities. Further, the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority was designated as the implementing agency for the Jamaica Logistics Hub by Cabinet. The Jamaica Logistics Hub Initiative is recognized as a priority area of focus for the government of Jamaica as it seeks to transform Jamaica into a logistics center economy. In order to carry out this mandate as the implementing agency for the Jamaica Logistics Hub Initiative, the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority is seeking to enter into a consultancy agreement with the Singapore Cooperation Enterprise for technical assistance. Mr. President, Singapore is known for its experience in the development and management of similar zones in Singapore and in other countries, and has achieved the status of being the highest performing logistics hub in Asia, ranking 7th out of 160 countries on the Logistics Performance Index. In light of these achievements, it is felt that Jamaica would greatly benefit from the assistance of Singapore in this undertaking. However, Mr. President, in light of the nature of the agreement which it is being contemplated to be entered into between the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority and the Singapore Corporation Enterprise, it is felt that this agreement would not fall squarely within the provisions of the Act. That is to say, the agreement would be undertaken using a hybrid of cost recovery and pro bono elements. Further, the Republic of the Government of Singapore does not have a policy of submitting bids in public tenders. It is within this context, Mr. President, that the Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023 and the Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023 Resolution are before this Honorable Senate today for debate. Mr. President, this order is being being made pursuant to the powers granted to the Minister responsible for finance under Section 4, Subsection 2 of the Public Procurement Act, which states that the Minister may, by order, subject to affirmative resolution, amend the first schedule. I must say that people at the Special Economic Zone Authority, especially the head legal advisor at the JACISA, Mrs. Janice Williams, has been very, very patient and consistent in trying to get this going. Before I came to this ministry, when I was in the other ministry, I used to be trying to get this done. I'm very happy to see that we're at a stage. When you came to speak to me, this was on the table. So, Mr. President, I will now proceed to do a presentation of the special provisions of the order. This order is entitled the Public Procurement Amendment of First Schedule Order 2023. Mr. President, the enacting provision sets out the authority under which the Minister responsible for finance is empowered to make an order amending the first schedule of the Public Procurement Act. In paragraph 1, which sets out the name of the order and provides that the order is to be read and construed as one with the Public Procurement Act and all amendments thereto. And paragraph 2, Mr. President, sets out the amendment of Part A of the Principal Act and inserts at paragraph B the amendment as a new subparagraph S to read, and subparagraph S reads, technical cooperation and assistance for the provision of goods, works, and services pursuant to any agreement between the Government of Jamaica through the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority and the Government of the Republic of Singapore through the Singapore Corporation Enterprise related to or connected with the implementation of the Jamaica Logistics Hub Initiative. Paragraph 2 of the order amends the first schedule by inserting a definition of the term Jamaica Logistics Hub Initiative. In closing, Mr. President, I would just like to reiterate the importance which the government attaches to this matter as we see the establishment of a logistics hub in Jamaica as a project which will advance the development and enhance economic growth. Mr. President, I therefore ask this Honorable Senate to affirm this order. If it pleases you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, thank you, Minister. Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to just commend the members of staff minister at the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority for their professionalism and their knowledge. In my other vocation, I've had reason to interface with them, and I'm telling you that on every occasion, not only have they been professional and knowledgeable, but extremely patient. So I want to commend the team at the authority. Minister, you may recall that sometime in 2012, one Mr. Anthony Hilton called Tony Hilton through a document called the Progressive Agenda, sought to, we're having a mic problem, sought to talk about an advanced importance of a logistics hub. Admitted at the time, some persons were, perhaps I'll say, naysayers. But Tony was very convinced that a logistics hub is the way forward for Jamaica. He knew and he believed and understood the importance of Jamaica taking advantage of its natural resource through the 7th largest harbor. And Tony was relentless in that quest. And so it wasn't coincidental that all his work culminated in the establishment of the Special Economic Zone. And I believe that Tony is smiling because he has seen in so many ways the fruit, not just of his vision, but of his labor, with the support of the technical team at the ministry. The opposition stands in full support of this amendment, and we have absolutely no challenge at all because we understand the importance of capitalizing on our natural resources, but of course, within the framework of what is before us today. Minister, you mentioned Singapore, and there is no doubt the world over that Singapore represents a best case scenario. The lessons that can be learned from Singapore is something that not only Jamaica, but I think all developing countries look to and try to see how can we emulate, how can we model, and how can we develop as Singapore has developed. And so we're very happy about this proposed partnership with Singapore. But Minister, I have to say that one of the things that concerns us, not limited to the logistics hub at all, but that concerns us as a country, is what seems to be the slow rate or no rate of technology transfer. And I'm hoping that through this partnership, that the technology transfer will be done, that we will engage as many local persons as possible so that the training and the knowledge can stay in Jamaica while we continue to do the other things that the consultation is supposed to bring. But we have to ensure that at all steps our local persons are engaged in it. And so we are in full support of the amendment to the Procurement Act to give effect to this consultation between Jamaica and Singapore. And Mr. President, you will have to forgive me because while the opposition has absolutely no challenge in supporting this bill, there is something that I can't help but to speak about in terms of procurement. Because you see, in 2014, I had the opportunity to sit on the Joint Select Committee that looked at the Procurement Act. And one of the things that we were very concerned about, both opposition and government, we were government then, was the importance of reducing corruption, was the importance of maximizing efficiency and effectiveness through an amended procurement system. And when I saw the notice for the Senate, and I saw what we were going to discuss, I have to disclose that I was most put off. And I was put off because I said to myself, procurement again? And I say that because as lawmakers, we come here time and time, year after year, with different things to stem corruption, to enhance efficiency, to maximize our economy. But time and time again, we fail to do that. And I am hoping, Minister, that as lawmakers, we don't become lawbreakers when it comes on to procurement. And it is something that I feel very strongly about. I am truly tired of hearing persons in position of trust whose names are being called, who the Integrity Commissioner, Contractor General have red flagged because we have done things that are questionable in terms of procurement. And if it is that we can't hold ourselves and those we lead accountable to comply and abide by procurement rules, then it makes absolutely no sense that we come here to establish rules. And so, Mr. President, while the opposition has absolutely no challenge in supporting the amendment before us, I am saying that, I am saying that in the wider scale of procurement, we all as lawmakers have to ensure that we comply with the rules of procurement. And it is so easy for us not to comply because there's a whole list. When you look at the first schedule, there's a whole list of things that you don't need procurement for. And we can understand why some of them you will not need, but we also know that within the Procurement Act, there are provisions in terms of projects that can be deemed national projects. There are projects that you need a sole contractor or sole source or emergency procurement. We understand all of that. We also understand that sometimes the situation is such that you have to utilize the sole source or the emergency. But what must be done is that the exercise of that power must be done with the greatest level of integrity. It must not be left to any question. There must not be any gray area. And so, Mr. President, as I close, I want to say that we support the amendment, but I call upon all of us, all 63 in the other place and all 21 up here, that we will hold ourselves accountable to the rules that govern us as we seek to maximize efficiency and to enhance the economy of this Jamaica land we love. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Fraser. Minister?
I thought there was other.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I thought there may have been.
No, I've given instructions to move with a lot because I know you guys need to be over here for 1:30.
I thought there may have been other contributors from that side, Mr. President. So I was allowed. But since
I asked that everybody move quickly so you can be out of here by 1:30.
Yes, given that it's 11:36, I feel confident.
We have another word doing. No problem, Senator Bunting. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Fraser.
I think I would like to start by also acknowledging the work of our colleague, Tony Hilton, who, as Minister in 2012, was a real champion and visionary for the idea of a logistics hub in Jamaica. And if I just read from the GIS website, as early as November 2012, he had gone on a mission to Singapore, establishing the first links. And just a quote from the GIS release, it said, turning to Singapore, Minister Hilton informed that the mission had benefited from in-depth presentations on Singapore's port systems and operations, which provided useful insight on modern practices and a grasp of global standards which exist in the logistics industry. To top it off, the Singaporean government expressed its willingness to offer us a range of technical support, given their own experiences and well-developed expertise. This was November 2012. 2012. And I will confess, Mr. President, that some of us used to chuckle because this was a constant intervention
we used to tease him that he was a broken record or a scratch record. He kept repeating, you know, no matter what the conversation was, somehow he always brought it back to the logistics hub. And it was really during the COVID period when logistics came to the forefront. And the chaos and the confusion and the delays that, you know, I remember sending a note to Tony and saying, you know, I really have to apologize. You were years ahead of the rest of us in terms of recognizing the value of this. When they're the fourth node, when they're talking about, you know, when it used to be Senator Webby, companies like Grace used to talk about just-in-time inventory, which was once best practice. After the experience of COVID, now they talk about just-in-case inventory, because it was so difficult to predict when your goods were going to arrive. And Tony was way ahead. And I want to acknowledge him, and I also want to acknowledge the current administration for carrying forward that initiative. I know, I understand an MOU was signed as far back as 2016 with Singapore, and although it has sort of had an elephantine gestation, but it seems something is moving forward now, and we welcome that. But I must tell you, Mr. President, on this issue of procurement, were it not for the legendary anti-corruption stand of the Singaporean government and the overwhelming competence of Singapore and the port, etc., in this area, I would have viewed this resolution with this amendment with some skepticism. Because as we know, Mr. President, when it comes to the Public Procurement Act, public procurement generally, and all the measures that we take to supposedly regulate and provide for good governance by the ministries, departments, and agencies, these things are often observed more as an exception than the rule. And a quick scan this morning of the Auditor General's website and looking at a summary of a couple of the performance audits, especially in the area of procurement, you would see criticisms of TPDCO, no feasibility studies for projects valuing $500 million, executive level staff earning tens of millions who don't possess the required minimum education standards. When we look, that just as well would apply to JCTC. When we look at the performance audit of procurement for the JCF, we see the use of direct and emergency procurement methodologies for contracts valuing billions, whether for manufacturing uniforms, providing meals for detainees, conducting repairs and maintenance of police facilities. And the Contractor General the Auditor General pointed out that the use of these avoids getting value for money. Of course, we recall just before the last local government election, the NWA debushing scandal, where some 800 million was rushed as if, you know, Bush grew up and surprised us. And it was an emergency that came upon us suddenly. And this, let me just say, and I'll be euphemistic, this expenditure deviated from the established guidelines. The Ministry of Education, we saw that audit here, and all those violations of best practice, I gather, as we speak. MOCA is conducting raids related to the issues brought up in the Auditor General's reports. Petrojam is another one. Months it took us at the PAC to go through all the violations. I gather a raid is taking place as we speak, related to the Ministry of Education. Mr. President, I looked at the Cabinet Office's website just earlier this morning to see, in terms of good governance again, where are we in terms of the status of annual reports? And their site was as current as the 20th of February, 2023. And when we look at some of the public sector entities and the periods covered by their last report, quite frankly, Mr. President, we should be appalled. It's unacceptable. And let me start with one near and dear to Senator Hill, the Cannabis Licensing Authority. The Cannabis Licensing Authority. The period covered by its last report was 2016-17. We're now in 23, that's 6 years past due. 6 years. I'll allow you to say that, Senator, bro. The CMU, the Caribbean Maritime University, also another one, racked with scandal. The period covered by last report, 2015-16. 7 years old. Clarendon Alumina Productions, major entity for this country, 2016-17. Factories Corporation, 2014-15. And you know, this next one is so ironic. Firearm Licensing Authority. Some of us will recall when the recent the new Firearms Act provided that if a licensed firearm holder missed the renewal date by days, they committed a criminal offense. A criminal offense, missing it by a day or a few days. Yet the FLA, their last report, 4 years late in their reporting, but they're making criminals out of licensed firearm holders who may forget by a few days to renew their firearm. JCDC, spending hundreds of millions every year. JCDC. The last report, 2013-14. JCDC, Jamaica Cultural Development Commission, last report, 2013-14. And this one will interest you, Senator Allen. Jamaica Tourist Board, 4 years late, 2018-2019. National Education Trust, and we will recall the National Education Trust was tied back with this Ministry of Education. 2016-2017, the last report. NEPA, NESA, NWA. TPDCO, well, NWA should stand out. We just heard a big announcement of 40 billion, I think, to be spent through NWA on roads. and yet NWA's last report was 2014-15. I mean, Minister, you want to challenge it on a point of order? I mean, I'm getting this from the Cabinet Office's website. So I am reporting, it's not me inventing these dates, I'm reporting it as the Cabinet Office does. TPDCO 2018-2019 and the SDC, Social Development Commission, 2015-2016. Now, that's not obviously an exhaustive list of government agencies, but I think it paints an appalling picture, an embarrassing picture of the standard of governance that is prevailing under this administration at this time. It is, and you know, Senator Webby, you would not accept that at Grace Kennedy. You would not accept that excuse that it has been going on for a long time. Your shareholders would not accept that excuse. So you of all people, I'm disappointed would make that comment.
We need to fix it.
Of course we need to fix it. And you should be one of the most strident advocates joining me.
Absolutely.
And saying you agree with me.
I agree with you. But it's nothing new.
Yes, Senator Weber said he agrees with me.
I agree with you. But this is nothing new.
So, Mr. President,
You know that, Senator,
while given
this has been a perennial problem in government.
Yeah, fix it. Let's fix it.
We need to fix it.
Given our confidence in the government of the Republic of Singapore and the Singapore Cooperation Enterprise as the partners that are being allowed to be an exception to the public procurement rules, we will not object, and in fact, we will support it. But I couldn't let this occasion pass without highlighting a greater concern of the myriad occasions that the observance is the exception rather than the rule. Yeah. Senator Brown reminds me, government badness versus good governance is what we seem to be pursuing under this administration. So, Mr. President, with those few words, I support this particular order, but caution that we need to pull up our socks and we need to do much better as a country. And when I say that, we are now speaking as Parliament, not as executive versus legislators, but as government more broadly, as Parliament. We need to hold executive to account, whether it is cabinet executive, or is often the case, the administrators, the managers, the CEOs of these agencies to put their house in order. Thank you.
Chair, if I may.
1 minute, please. Thank you, Senator Montin. Senator Dunwell.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to, I think this is working. It sounds like it's working. Yes. I'm one of the few. Oh, okay. Sorry, Chair.
It shows the
I just wanted to clarify. I just wanted to clarify my exchange with Senator Montin. And Senator Montin, I'm on record from my first time in the Senate from 2007, where the government at that time inherited public agencies and public bodies with accounts and reports, sometimes a decade behind. That is unacceptable. And what you have read a while ago, I'm on record of saying is unacceptable in terms of good governance. I want to make another suggestion, Senator Bunting and colleagues. Senator Hill, I think we should work towards treating all of these statutory agencies as how we treat a public company. Because the shareholders are the Jamaican taxpayers. And I'm saying we need to work towards having a deadline that these accounts, audited accounts and reports are ready at least 90 days after their year end, and work towards that. That should be best practice, Senator Bunting. And I support what you're saying. What we just need to do is, so we need to ask ourselves, why is it not being done? Is it a matter of resources? Is it a matter of that the technology, the systems that they're using in place are so archaic that they can't produce timely and accurate reporting within the 90 days? So I support your call that maybe what we need to do is to do a overall review of why are the accounts of these public bodies so late. Is it resources that they need? Is it the technology that is not up to date? But Senator Bunting, you have my assurance that I'm totally in agreement with you that these public bodies need to produce your accounts on a timely and accurate basis. Full stop. Full stop. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Well, Senator Brown.
I'm so happy that there's bipartisan buy-in on the importance of reports from public bodies, keeping within the established legislation. I know of no law re-establishing a public body that does not require the report to the minister and then from the minister to cabinet and to the parliament. The truth is, we have not enforced these rules, and public bodies have gotten away with it. And that has festered corrupt practices because we fail to hold accountable these officials. And I'm glad that the comments made by Senator Bunting has attracted the response from Senator Webby, which show the people of Jamaica that in this chamber there are things we can agree on. The thing we must now do is do it, not just talk about it. Mr. President, there's a time when bodies used to enter into contracts, but nobody knew about those contracts. But the Contractor General Office insisted that there be quarterly reports on contracts. And the truth be told, Senator Webby, that has been effective. The problem is that we in Parliament has now changed the law. So the Contractor General Office or the new Integrity Commission is scared of publishing these contracts. And we need to change that law for an abundance of caution, so that the Integrity Commission can continue to publish these quarterly contract reports. Had that been done, somebody would have raised an issue long ago, Westcon, and the numerous contracts which has led to issues of conflict of interest being raised in the public space. We need to give the regulatory agency, including the Parliament itself, the power to sanction such breaches. And that is what I believe is coming out of this debate today, that there's consensus between Senator Webby, Senator Bunting, and I hope that this consensus between both is reflective of consensus between the government and the opposition and the two main political parties. Because I know under the leadership of Mark Jefferson Golden, we share the view that good governance must prevail over government badness. Whether the government badness comes from the minister or the technocrat in the ministry. So, President, it is clear to me that the way the Integrity Commission has gone about ensuring that contracts are reported and failure to report those contracts can be enforced. I'm also confident by the fact that even at the highest level in the United States, when you enter into certain deals, be it the Stormies of the Daniels, you can be held accountable if you break the law. One former US president said, read my lips. Well, I've been reading lips about possible indictment, but I'll wait today or Monday to hear if some people are above the law. Final thing I wish to say, President, about enforcing rules of good governance and accountability is that the Integrity Commission has issued a zero tolerance policy to the 84 parliamentarians and to the public sector, public servants who must fill in their thing. So let me use this as a reminder to all 84 of us that the reports are due by the 31st of March. And let me report all of us that we should strive to get our reports certified by the Integrity Commission. It is not good when some of us who are leaders are not able to say our declaration isn't certified. So this is a plea I make to all of us to so conduct ourselves that we can get certification of the integrity reports that we make to Parliament. So, Mr. President, I'm happy to see the bipartisan approach to accountability. And I thank Senator Bunting for raising from the OPM website those outstanding. Senator Bunting, you are doing the work of the Minister of Information. Well, at least he has been bold enough to say it is a lack of communication why the polls are looking the way it looks. May it please you, Mr. President.
Sorry, Senator Brown, thank you very much. Senator Gamble.
Thank you, Mr. President.
There's a resolution before.
You're sure that's what you're talking about?
There's a resolution.
I know what you're talking about. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Don't blame me for the hearing. Don't blame me if you two need syringe.
Yes, Mr. President, the Public Procurement Act, the resolution before us relating to that is, what I don't want us to do is to lose sight of the importance of this partnership with the government of Singapore. Because I think especially when we have viewers listening on and we have persons in the gallery, especially students, it is important for us to really help Jamaicans, because we believe in participatory governance. We have take every opportunity to not just pander to what may seem popular at the moment, but to help persons to understand. And this order before us today is quite important because Jamaica, as we know, is strategically located between the Panama Canal and the United States. And what is happening with what will happen as a result of this partnership is that our location and the strategic nature of that location will help Jamaica to continue to grow as we have been doing over the last few years. As could have been heard from the Prime Minister's presentation last night, Jamaica is in a position that it has never been in before, where we're able to do things from our own pockets without having to borrow. Jamaica is doing amazing things in all categories, and this order will lend itself to our country continuing along that path. Now, Mr. President, one of the things that we have to be careful is that when we pull things from our website, we don't mislead people to believe that it only relates things that happen at a particular time. And if any at all I was trying to be petty or political, I would mention that, you know, PICA, for example, under certain leadership at a certain time, those who may be speaking today also had delays in submitting what needed to be submitted. But we're not going to go there, because the importance of this order is that we're focusing on the fact that technical cooperation and assistance for the provision of goods, works, and services between the GOG and the Republic of Singapore will help Jamaica to move forward. It's been a long time that we constantly talk about Singapore and how wonderful that they do, but it's great that actually we're no longer talking about it. We're putting into action a partnership with a government that we all admire on both sides. So I think that is important. We also love to talk about our strategic location. So I think we need to focus on the fact that finally something is happening which is moving forward with the fact that we are strategically located. How do we utilize that to help the country to continue and to grow? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Minister. Mr. President, I'm very surprised at some of the comments, pleased at others. Senator Fraser-Binns and especially Senator Bunting mentioned a number of things. One of them I would agree with. In this business of Jamaica, the country, Jamaica Inc., somebody else might call it, we do pass the baton from one to the other. And if I were to make that pronunciation properly, as the French would do, pass the baton from one to the other. Okay? And sometimes, Mr. President, in the practice of a relay, the runners have to be taught how to be careful to take the baton. Because sometimes one runner might, with good intention, visit foreign places and say other things, but in the process something becomes associated with them. For instance, Mr. President, when I was a young boy, I used to hear about Crown and Anchor. Well, Crown and Anchor took on a whole different meaning in the passing of the baton to us. But we will leave that alone. Yeah, you and I mean, at different ages used to see the three-card trick. But the Crown and Anchor thing there is a clear trick before your eye. But you know what? Let's move on. Because now we carry the baton. And in carrying that baton, a wonderful, wonderful serving MP called multimodal Mike Henry also carried that baton. And he today must be complimented for that. Procurement and integrity, Mr. President, is not something we want to turn into political football, and therefore I want to cement the fact that the Andrew Holness administration has done the most to give the authority to the Integrity Commission. The one that you're talking about now, it's us that have given the strength to that, and we continue to make sure we support and respect it, and we are very proud of that.
When you said the Andrew one, I thought you were going to say certified.
We have also supported it, not given free talk and cheap talk and Sosa talk. We have put the money behind it to make sure the Integrity Commission works. So we're making sure that that continues. I, for instance, Mr. Chairman, chair the Infrastructure Committee of Cabinet. Any contract over 68 million must come there. And given my banking background, a long time, and my finance background, the ministers that are there, including Minister Samudia, you should see what has to go on. We will not accept any nonsense. If the contractor is not up, hasn't done their work, or have done bad work, no go. And we recommend to Cabinet as we see that they meet the criteria. So we are making sure that that happens. No apologies in that. Look at the infrastructure investment across this country. Yes, you can pick out one that may not have gone well. How are you going to run a country and something doesn't go bad? You're dealing with human beings. But look at the body of infrastructure work that has gone on since 2016 under the Andrew Holness administration, including the Portia Simpson flyover. This has been outstanding. So, we make it clear that we do good governance within the acceptable integrity rules. The CLA was brought up. Absolutely. Prime Minister reminded everybody that I am responsible for that and I take full responsibility for it. But you know something? No, Peter. That is well known. We know how that goes. You have been a minister. Some of them running up their mouth have been a minister. You know who has the responsibility. You might have touched it, but you have the responsibility. And in that responsibility, Senator Brown, I want to say to you that as I did at the NWC, when I went there, many of the reports weren't up to date. You can ask the President. I sat with him and I said, this is one of the first things we have to do. When I handed on the baton to my colleague, all the annual reports were up to date. Everything was in order. Everything was in order. When I handed over NIC, I said, you will never have the authority to do that. You're a dreamer in daytime. So I'm saying to you that when I went to NIC, I sat down with the CEO, the same thing. Where are the annual reports? Because you know, Senator Bunting, when I'm looking at a loan, when I'm looking at a bank, the first thing I have to see the financial statement. If they're not up to date, I can't have the right number. So I made sure, with my background, I wouldn't leave those organizations without having it up to date. So let's come to CLA. 6 years behind. I'm there now a year. I can tell you very surely that we are going to make sure those are brought up to date. In fact, given the responsibility that people knew I had and made more public yesterday, that is going to have to be completely reorganized because it's now in operation in 6 years and we have to fix that. So we take that on board and we're going to make sure it's fixed. Part of the problem is we don't have enough auditors. I talk to the auditing firms, like you do, Senator Ponting, and you know where they're bringing them from. They're bringing them from India, they're bringing them from Sri Lanka, they're bringing them from anywhere they can get them. We don't have enough. It's like our engineers. We don't train enough. So we have that capacity problem. There's another government institution that is way back for 5-6 years. And when I looked at what the problem was, it was the procurement problem. You have to, if you're going to go outside and get auditors as a government entity, you have to go through the same long procurement process, and it goes back and forth, and they couldn't get the auditors, so now they're working to get it. So we have to constantly look at that procurement to make sure it works, and the cabinet, led by the Prime Minister, is doing that. They're archaic, But Senator Webby, the truth is we don't have enough auditors. We're going to have to do better than that. You know what you have to pay to get your auditors and your grace, so you can imagine. Some say procurement is sometimes a hindrance. This government doesn't look at that. We say it's the rule. Until the rules are changed, we follow them. So, Mr. President, I'm seeking that we have the affirmative on this, our resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Hill. The question is that a motion once of which the Minister gave earlier be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Yes. So, Minister Hill, we move on now to the trademarks amendment rules.
Mr. President, this is an 83-page document, and I don't expect to go through it, so I'm going to have my brief. But in order to make sure that I give compliments for the people who put this brief together and done the work, I think Mrs. Yvette Sutherland Reed is here. She's our Chief Legal Officer at the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. Yvette does a tremendous amount of work, including working with Janice Williams on the resolution I just tabled. Ms. Janika Allen, who is also from our legal service in the ministry. And we have people at Jaipur who helped us as well, and we're very happy for their help. In 1999, Mr. President, the Trademarks Act was enacted to prescribe a legal framework for the registration and regulation of trademarks. Thereafter, the Act was amended in 2013 and 2021 to maintain consistency with international standards. Constantly, we have to remember that as a country, and especially a small country, in order to trade across the world, we have to be compliant with a number of international rules and regulations and treaties. Of note is the fact that the Trademarks Amendment Act 2021 created a legal framework necessary to facilitate Jamaica's accession to the Madrid Protocol. The Madrid Protocol, many of you will remember, Jamaica Intellectual Property Office worked very hard at that. They're involved in this trademarks issue as well. Ms. Lily-Claire Bellamy and her team. The Madrid Protocol is an international system for obtaining trademark protection in a number of countries and or regions by using a single application. This will facilitate greater protection to Jamaica's trademark owners. In order to give effect to the purposes of that act, there is a need to amend the trademark rules. These rules before us provide for, among other things, the administration locally of the international registration of trademarks, the setting out of the criteria for the international registration of trademarks, an application procedure, Mr. President, for international registration of trademarks, the opposition procedure for the international registration of a trademark, and the administration fees in respect of the international registration of trademarks. Mr. President, also the prescription of the relevant forms. Therefore, the Trademarks Amendment Rules 2022 before us are being promulgated in keeping with the Section 80 of the Act, subject to affirmative resolution. Clause 1, Mr. President. This clause provides for the short title and applicability of the regulations. Clause 2, the amendment to Rule 2 of the principal rules. This clause defines key terms used throughout the regulations, including the following new terms. Communication service means a service by which a document may be sent or delivered and includes post, facsimile, electronic mail, courier, or an electronic communication system. The NIS classification of goods and service. means the system of classification of goods and services as amended, revised, and published from time to time, established under the Nice Agreement concerning the international classification of goods and services for the purposes of the registration of marks, concluded in Nice in 1957, revised at Stockholm in 1967, and at Geneva in 1977, amended in 1979, and acceded to by Jamaica on the 7th day of November 2005. Clause 3, this clause amends the Rule 4 of the Principal Rules by inserting new paragraphs 2, 3, and 4, which provide for the following: that the registrar may issue directions with respect to the use of any form required under these rules, that the registrar must publish on the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office's website any dereliction, that should be any direction relating to the use of forms, any amendment to those directions, and any amendment to any form, and that except for international applications, the requirement to use a prescribed form is satisfied once a replica of the form containing the required information is accepted by the registrar. Clause 4, Mr. President, is the amendment of Rule 5 of the Principal Rules. This clause amends Rule 5 by replacing the current Rule 5 and substituting, therefore, a new rule which expands the types of trademarks that can be registered to include the following. And this is very interesting. There's a sound mark, there's a smell mark, there's a notion mark, a touch mark, and there, Mr. President, is a taste mark, a pattern mark, a hologram mark, and of course, Mr. President, a multimedia mark. This clause further allows for the applicant to claim a color or a combination of colors as a distinctive feature of a trademark, like Grace's red 100 years that you can't miss from up in the sky. Clause 5, Mr. President, the insertion of new rules 5A and B, insertion of new rule 5A. This new rule 5A allows an applicant to make a request to the registrar to expedite examination of the application for the registration and for payment of the relevant fees. Very important. I'm sure you agree. Council, but Senator in this instance. The rule also sets out the procedure for making the application and the registrar's power to deal with the application. Insertion of Rule 5B. This new Rule 5B allows for an application to be made for the registrar to expedite other types of application apart from registration under the Act. The rule sets out the procedure application form to be used and the relevant fee payable. Clause 6, Mr. President, amendment of Rule 7 of the Principal Rules. The clause amends subparagraph 1 of Rule 7 by deleting the reference to the 4th schedule and substituting, therefore, the reference to the version of the Nice classification goods and services in force at the time of the conversion. This allows for future modification of the rules in relation to the rules without amendments. Further, Mr. President, a new subparagraph 2 has been inserted to provide that the purposes of trademark registrations for goods after 1958 and any registrations prior to that date where the specifications were converted under the old law, the goods and services shall be classified in accordance with Nice classification of goods and services in force at the time of filling the application or of the conversion, as the case may be. Mr. President, Clause 7, amendment to the Rule 8 of Principal Rules. Rule 8 is amended in subparagraph 1 by deleting the reference to the 4th schedule and substituting, therefore, the reference to the version of the NIS classification of goods and services in force at the time of the filing of the application. This, Mr. President, allows for future modification without amendments to the rules. Further, it is proposed that the reference to the fourth schedule in subparagraph 2 and 3 be deleted. Additionally, Mr. President, new subparagraphs 4 and 5 are inserted to provide that an application for registration of a trademark shall not include a reference to class headings under the NIS classification of goods and services. These do not specifically identify the goods and services. As such, Mr. President, the registrar may refuse any such application unless there are further details or specifications provided which create certainty as to the good or service, and the registrar determines that the specification is not vague. Clause 8, Mr. President. Amendment to Rule 9 of the Principal Rules. In subparagraph 1, subsection C of Rule 9, a new subparagraph is being inserted to provide that an applicant transferring a right to use a trademark by assignment under Section 30 of the Trademark Act shall file their address for service in Jamaica on a prescribed form. A new subparagraph E is also being inserted to provide that any other person from whom the registrar requires an address for service to be filed must file same on the prescribed form. Additionally, Mr. President, in paragraph 3, the reference to section 54 is being deleted as a reference is incorrect. Further, Mr. President, subparagraph 5 is amended by deleting the current paragraph 5 and replacing, therefore, with a new paragraph to expand the powers of the registrar to require the person concerned to file an address for service on and using the prescribed form. The rule is further amended, Mr. President, by inserting new subparagraphs 8 and 9. Subparagraph 8 provides that a person may substitute a new address for service by notifying the registrar on the relevant form. Additionally, subparagraph 9 provides for the circumstances within which the holder of an international registration designating Jamaica is to file an address for service in Jamaica. Amendment to Rule 12 of the Principal Rules. Rule 12 is being amended to correct grammatical errors. Further, Mr. President, subparagraph 6 is being deleted and replaced with a new subparagraph which provides that where a person fails to file a counterstatement where there is an opposition to the registration of the trademark within the period allowed by these rules, the application for the registration of the trademark will be deemed abandoned. Mr. President, this morning we spoke about the passing of one of our colleagues. And I know there is the funeral service to take place shortly. I have been asked if this can be delayed, and Mrs. Sutherland Weed, this is not part of the FATF arrangement. We could delay this to allow the funeral to go ahead. The urgency is not as if it's a FATF assignment. So, with advice, Mr. President, and with the will of the Senate, I'd be very pleased and be willing to accommodate that we suspend at this time and continue the Senate for a later date.
I am not.
I did say, Mr. President, that somebody is going to move that motion, and I'm sure then you will rule.
Thank you for your graciousness. Well,
I thank Senator Orbin Hill for his kind consideration. We appreciate it.
thank you for your consideration, Senator Hill. So, Senator Hill, I take it your opening is completed.
We take a pause at clause 9, Mr. President, and pick up from there when we come back. Yes, we can complete the submission.
So its opening is not
we suspend the debate for today and continue to submit.
And I'm just trying to get an understanding. Your opening is not completed.
No. In fact, to be clear, Mr. President, I am, if you'll allow me, make a motion to suspend the debate for today, given the urgency.
I accept that. I just want to know if the opening
No,
is
the opening is not complete.
Understood.
We stop at clause 9.
Okay. Members of the Senate would have heard the Minister and the response from Senator Scott Motley. And the question is that the debate on the motion concerning a Trademark Act, specifically the Trademark Amendment Rules 2022, be suspended for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Minister?
Mr. President, given that there's no further business for the day, I move that the Senate, the meeting of the Senate, be suspended for a date to be, to be adjourned for a date to be decided. Thank you.
Just before I put the motion, members of the Carmack who are visiting, I suspect that the issue of trademark may be of some interest to you. So if you just send and talk to the clerk, we would have a couple copies of the regulations that are being passed you may find of interest, okay? So thanks again for coming, and we are at the end of the day sitting. Usually, we have some more quarreling and argument, but today was a quiet day. I think perhaps reflecting on the life of one of our colleagues who is being buried today. So maybe the behavior was best, and I know some of you come expect to hear some argument and some cas, but that's not to be today. So you have to come back for that. Don't Lambert. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Aye. Against? So the Senate now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Give me the boss up,
Donna.
Thank you.
It's regal.
Your government is working for you. On the East Coast,